Combat and Hilal TV invite you for this special interview. We have a very special guest, Noorjahan Safi Niaz, founder of the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan, ferocious in her struggle along with her organization for the rights and dignities of Muslim women. Welcome Noorjahan ji to this special show of Communism Combat and Hilal TV.
Thank you.
What made you pick up this issue as founder member in 2007? What did you see the need?
People who founded this organization, myself and Zakia, we have been working with the Muslim women for the last many years. And while we were working in our own cities and our own communities, we felt that we need a national platform for Muslim women to come together and raise their issues nationally. The need was felt because Muslim women don't have a voice within the community. So we don't have religious groups or even organizations where Muslim women can go and talk about her problems. As far as the state is concerned, the state only wants to listen to the voice of the Muslim men. So where do we go and whom do we talk to? So the need was felt to have a national platform where we could come together and we air and talk about our issues.
What has been the response from the Muslim male leadership and the state?
Muslim male religious leadership has been very, very difficult to deal with. They have termed us as un-Islamic. They've been telling us that you don't have the right to speak on Quran, on Sharia, on issues which are part of the religion. You have no business to talk about that. Our stand is that we don't want to talk to you also. We will create our own agency, we are our own people, we are responsible to our own God, we can read the Quran, we can find out our own meanings, we don't really need you. So that has been our relationship with the religious group. As far as ordinary Muslim men are concerned, they have been largely very, very supportive. They have been very supportive. Of course, their support is not very obvious, or they will not take a public stand on certain issues. But the fact that they come to our Sharia Adalat, so the fact that on the issue of codification, a lot of Muslim men have been supporting us, and they've been saying that this is the need of the hour, and we should have done this long time back. So largely, there's a very kind of a silent support to what we are doing. As far as the state is concerned, the previous government, the Congress government, they didn't even think that we are part of the community. So because of the vote bank politics or whatever, it's the Muslim male religious leadership that they will want to listen to. And so Muslim women didn't really concern them. And with this government, it's another game completely. I mean,
why is it another game with this government?
With this government, especially on the issue of Muslim women's personal law reform, this government wants a uniform civil code. Now this government is talking about legislative change. It is not agreeable to not just Muslims but the rest of the community as well. I'm sure the Hindu community would not want to give away the Hindu Marriage Act, or the Parsis I'm sure don't want to give away their Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act. So this is a propaganda, something to beat the community with. That's the agenda of this government.
Today living in a kind of atmosphere of heightened majoritarian communalism, where minority communities, particularly the Muslim minority, is under consistent target. How much more difficult does this make your task when you're talking about justice for 50% of the community within the community? Justice for Muslim women, does the task become that much more difficult?
Yeah, the task does become very difficult because finally we are talking about the community, we are talking about families. When we are demanding justice for Muslim women, we are also somewhere demanding justice for the community, for 50% of because it is part of a family. The family needs justice, community needs justice. But the task does become difficult because somewhere we are challenging the long held notion of religious interpretation by patriarchal forces. So when we are challenging that, we are challenging somewhere the community also. But our strategy is, or our concern is that we want to take the community along. And with this kind of a government, it becomes difficult because the community then tells us that, well, the time is not right. Why are you taking up these issues? You are not supposed to anyway talk about Quran and Hadith and Muslim women's legal rights. So why are you talking about it now? And they tell us that you are part of the BJP government, or you are part of the RSS groups. We've been supported by these kind of groups. So then it becomes all the more difficult for us to convince them that we want justice for women. That's all we want. 10-20 years back they told us the time is not right, the Babri Masjid is gone, so now why do you do this? 10 years back they told us the Gujarat genocide has happened. Why are you doing this to the community? Just keep quiet, don't raise up these issues. And now again with this new government, this is being told to us more often that this government is not right. Why are you talking to them? Why are you going to them? So yeah, difficult time for us also.
The other question I had is that you've maintained very uncompromising and necessary focus on reform of Muslim personal law and feminist interpretation of the hadiths and the Quranic principles, which is very important. But has this in some way diluted the overall demand for a gender just code for all Indian women?
Well, my question is who was demanding this gender just law? I mean, if you look at the mainstream women's movement, then there was a set of women's organizations or groups who were demanding. How much was that kind of a demand coming from the larger communities, larger societies, groups that are there, the larger community that we're talking about? Because the Hindu Marriage Act is something which the Hindu community would want to hold on to. The other religious minorities, especially the Muslims, Christians, Parsis, everybody wants to hang on to their personal laws. It's also something to do with their identity. Fortunately, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, Sharia laws or personal laws have become associated with the community identity. So any talk of taking away that law also means there's an attack on the identity. So, and this kind of a thinking is not just with the Muslims, I'm sure with all other religious minorities, that kind of a thinking is going on. With this government talking about uniform civil code is obviously it is one stick to beat the community with. This government is not even concerned about gender justice. So we know why, from where that is coming from. We oppose uniform civil code, one, because it's not going to be helping the community anyway. The Muslim community definitely not. And because we want to take the community along, this issue has become so controversial and so sticky that the kind of environment that we are trying to create, where we want to take the community along on reforms issue at least, now even that kind of base will go away and that kind of support will also go away. And finally, our concern is justice for women. And if that justice is going to be a little easier by talking about reforms in personal law, then we would rather do that and not talk about something which might probably not happen, which I don't know when it will come and who will bring it and with what motives it will come. So this is more achievable, more effective, more something which the community, at least we will be able to at least convince the community on this issue.
You're going to have a Sharia court this afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
What are the most acute problems faced by Muslim women today, according to you?
Apart from the legal discrimination, I mean, that is the biggest unsaid or unspoken issue within the community, of oral divorce, of rampant polygamy, of very less meher amounts that she gets at the time of marriage, custody of children, inheritance, anything to do with the legal aspect. Now that is extremely discriminatory, and Muslim women are like oppressed like anything. And the kind of cases we get, not just in the Adalat in Mumbai, but in Ahmedabad, in Tamil Nadu, in Rajasthan, in all other places, Muslim women come to us in hordes with these kind of problems. So that is one of the biggest issue which the community also is not willing to address. Now that apart, there are issues of lack of education. Even now we have girls not allowed to study beyond a particular class. Employment is still a difficult proposition. So it's like you study as much as you want, but you cannot work, you cannot earn money. And the decision of whether she will work or not, study or not, is then pushed on to her husband's family. She is married early. So because the age of marriage, again there is no law which says that you cannot marry below a particular age. Muslim girls even now are being married off very early. So early marriage would mean complete stop to her education, and there is no way that she can become financially independent.
So Bama's demand is what then? For codification and for what? What are the specific demands?
We have five issues on which we work.
Okay.
One is codification, legal reforms. The other is education, livelihood, security and health. So if you look at education, health and livelihood, these are socio-economic issues that we are focusing on. When it comes to security, it's not just the security of women, but also security of the community. So when we talk to the police about not picking up Muslim youth just because there's some problem somewhere, we are tackling that issue at that level.
And
also.
what are the legal reforms that you are specifically talking about?
We want a codified Muslim family law, because for Muslims we do not have a codified law. We have a Hindu Marriage Act for the Hindus. There's an act under which Christian family matters are resolved. There's a law for the Parsi community also. As far as the Muslims are concerned, we only have two small pieces of legislation, three actually. The Sharia Application Act of 1937, the Dissolution of Muslim Marriage Act of 1939, and after the Shabano case,
Muslim
the
Women's
80s
Protection of
Act.
Divorce Act.
That is all that we have. There is no law, codified law, which says what should be the age of marriage, how much meher she should be getting at the time of marriage, how do you ensure free and open consent of the girl and the boy for the marriage, what do we do about divorce, is there a method by which a divorce has to be given, there is no law. What do we do about polygamy, do we allow a Muslim man to have more than one wife, there is no law. What do we do about custody, there is no codified law. So what runs is the Sharia law. The Sharia man-made, actually literally man-made law which runs the community. It has got nothing to do what the Quran says. Quran says one thing, the Sharia says something else. So because there is no law, you also have kind of judgments that are coming from the Delhi High Court about 2 years back and the Gujarat High Court now, where a Muslim marriage is valid at the age of 15. Now because there is no law, the judges also don't know on what basis to give judgments. So they rely on the unwritten discriminatory Sharia law. Because there is no law, Muslim men are free to divorce their wife the way they want to. So we have had instances of Muslim women coming us with a little piece of paper where the husband has written talaq, 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 and that's it. The marriage is over. We have SMS talaq, we have email talaq, we have qazis writing talaq on behalf of the husband and sending it to their wife. So it's like, jo chal raha hai chalne do, this is how it is, this is the Sharia law, it is divine, you cannot change. And then you have Muslim women suffering. And then you have polygamy, then you have halala.
Actually, halala is a practice which is coming up more and more, and it seems to be deeply embedded in the psyche of certain sections of the community. How do you deal with it?
The practice says that if a man and women have divorced, then they are no longer husband and wife, and then after their divorce they want to come back together as husband and wife, it cannot be that they just remarry again. The wife has to marry another man, she has to consummate that marriage, the other guy will have to divorce her the next day, and then she has to have an iddat of 3 months, and then only she can come back to her former husband.
And this, according to you, is completely un-Islam.
Absolutely, it has got no basis. How can it be? This is prostitution. I mean, Quran and Allah will not allow something like this to happen to any women, to any human being. So this is a practice which has creeped in, and it is well, not in Bombay so much, but in the north it's rampant. We've had instances of women who have been forced by their own husbands to have halala, to do halala for 8 times, 9 times.
It's almost like forced rape.
Absolutely. This practice has no place in Islam. It has got no place in a society, in a dignified society. So there has to be a law which has to say that, well, you cannot do this. Or if a woman is forced into doing halala, she has to have some law which says that, well, if it happens to you, you go to the police station, you lodge a complaint. Because there is no law, there is no recourse. Where on what basis should she demand justice? So there has to be a law to stop all these practices.
Have you taken these issues of triple talaq, polygamy, halala, etc. to the Muslim Personal Law Board?
No, we don't want to take it to the Muslim Personal Law, because our question is, who are they?
Okay. So you feel they have no
legitimacy. They are an NGO like any other NGO. We are an NGO, they are an NGO, we are equal. Who are they? To whom should we go to? And when we talk to women in the communities, in the villages, where we are working in the 10 states of the country, and we ask them, do you know where the Muslim Personal Law Board is? Do you know what is the Muslim Personal Law Board? And women are like, kya hai ye? So if they say that they are representing the community, then where is that representation? What is the process of that representation? And for us, the question is, there are nobody to whom we should be going. So we would rather go to the state, we would rather go to the ordinary community, the ordinary men and women within the community, and talk to them.
Noor Jahan ji, you've also sort of raised the whole issue of faith and worship for women, and raised, particularly when the Haji Ali Dargah suddenly discontinued quote-unquote permission to allow Muslim women to get inside near the mazar, the innermost sanctum of the Haji Ali Dargah. What has been the response of the court and the state and the authorities to this move?
Yeah, I and a lot of people in Mumbai have been visiting this mazar since we were children, and we were able to go right into the sanctum and touch the mazar and do our prayers or whatever. And in 2011, when we realized that the whole mazar has been cordoned off for women, so women cannot enter this room where the mazar is. It was something which affected me personally, because it's something which I have been doing for all my life, and now suddenly who are these people who have decided that I should not be doing that? And also the influence of conservative groups within these trusts and these mosques, and these trustees who manage these structures. Now, what kind of people are entering into these bodies, and who are they to take decisions? They are supposed to be managing the premises and not decide who will come and who will not come. And we had a dialogue with the trustees, and the response was that, well, this is Sharia, and all along we were mistaken and we were doing something wrong. Now,
so suddenly in 2008?
Yeah, so suddenly we realized that we were doing wrong, so we need to correct ourselves, and so hence the decision. And the second argument was that, well, women come in all sorts of dresses, and they wear saris and the pallos fall off, so it's not okay that there's intermingling of sexes and all that rubbish. So that was the kind of response, and we felt that there's no point talking to them. Then we went to the state, we went to the Minority Development Department, and we requested them to intervene. And they did try to get us and the trustees together to talk, but the trustees refused to come. So there was no dialogue, there was no way we could have spoken to them directly. And so a couple of meetings were attempted, but it didn't happen. And then we realized that, well, now this is the only way out for us. And there were two reasons. One is why the reasons that you give has to make sense to us. It has to make sense to us as citizens and as women. And secondly, the state must intervene, because it is the responsibility of the state to uphold the constitutional values of equality of sexes and equality of everyone. And the third reason is that if we don't stop this now, we have these conservative elements entering all dargah trusts and the managements. And for all you know, tomorrow you will have a decision by these trustees that even non-Muslims should not come to Haji Ali Dargah. So this whole tradition of
syncretic tradition.
These places are for women, for men, for everyone, for people of all faiths to come together. And if that, so it's much more than just gender discrimination. It's also pointing us towards what can happen in future. And it is this Wahhabi, Salafi influence that is creeping in, which we need to stop. And as a citizen of India, and as a Muslim woman, and as a Muslim person, it is our responsibility to stop that. And hence we've gone to the court. Let's see what the court has to do.
What has the court done so far?
We just filed it, I think, 2 months back.
Yeah.
So I think it will take some time for the hearing to happen.
You said that there's a kind of a rightward shift within the community with Wahhabi, Salafi kind of Islam permeating and affecting syncretic worship, which is so integral to Indian Islam. Do you see any other manifestations of it?
Many manifestations. I mean, even 5 years back, we didn't have small little girls wearing scarf and burqa. I mean, but today I see a 2-year-old, 3-year-old girl made to wear a scarf and a burqa. Burqa, I mean, not just a scarf. I mean, yeah, full length burqa. इतनी सी बच्ची वो पहन के घूम रही है. No, this is what else. This is what it is. This is the kind of influence that is happening. There's a shift from Khuda Hafiz to Allah Hafiz. I mean, Khuda is a very, very zameen ka wo lafz hai, no? And it's getting wiped out, and you have the so-called Arabic word. I mean, we are okay with Allah. Definitely, we speak Allah 10 times in a day. But Khuda Hafiz has its own origin, and that has to be preserved. What's happening right now is that you should not be wishing your Christian friends Merry Christmas or wishing them New Year. It's going around in WhatsApp and Facebook. Now, what is this? You're trying to cut away the community from the rest of the society that we are living in. Finally, respecting others' faith, tolerating others' faith, believing in others' faith as well is so much part of Islam as well.
So Islam should be kind of the tolerant, peaceful face of Islam. Absolutely. Needs to be reaffirmed.
Not just tolerant, we just don't have to tolerate the other. We have to integrate, and we have to assimilate. We have to create a new culture.
Khatun Appa, Nurjan and others also did perform namaz when Zeenat Shaukat Ali sang the azan.
Yeah.
So you believe that whether it is the azan, whether it is going inside a mosque or praying, women have full authority.
Full authority. Women should have spaces within the masjids as well. I mean, why only men have to go to the masjid and pray? Women have difficulties in finding space. So where there's that spirit of community which Muslim men are, they get the privilege of being part of the community when they go to the namaz in a mosque. Muslim women should also have that opportunity. So every masjid must have space allocated for Muslim women to come in and pray.
So is that going to be the next step?
Yeah. Let's hope so, yes.
Thank you so
definitely.
much, Noor. Very
Thank
lovely
you.
conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hille le tak jor duniya hille le tak jor